Susan Young, if you don't know it, is the outreach coordinator at the Shiloh Museum of Ozark History. And she's a 5th generation Ozarker, so she knows all the, I'm sure heard a lot of stories. One thing that's near and dear to my heart and my family is she's the author of So Big This Little Town, the founding of Tawny Town, and then the best of the editor of Memories I Can't Let Go Of. If y'all haven't gotten either one of those books, you would really, really, really enjoy them. She's been a Master Gardener since 2007. So Susan, we're so happy to have you. Thank you.
I'm looking at the time because I know everybody wants to get out of here and jump on your motorcycle and go. The funniest thing I've seen so far, I really don't mind Bikes, Blues, and Barbecue because they bring a lot of money in and they're gone. I told John King they swoop in like locusts and then they disappear. And it's kind of interesting just to see everybody. But the most interesting thing I've seen so far was on the way here this morning. I saw 3 creatures, I thought, on a motorcycle. A man driving the thing and the woman on the back. And in between them was a bear. A full-size bear. When I got up closer, I saw it was a full, like as big as me, adult-size teddy bear. And I thought, now is that just for fun or is that like a cushion? It was hilarious to see. I will try to be mindful of that all the time. Let me see. I'm so glad to be here. I know a lot of y'all in here, and let me say I have learned, and I'm not going to start naming names because I won't get all of y'all, but I have learned so much from a lot of y'all about gardening and about local history and about the environment, and I just appreciate what y'all do, just by virtue of your passion. I just appreciate that. All right, my Shiloh Museum advertisement. A lot of y'all have been there. A lot of y'all are supporters of the museum or volunteer there, and I thank you for that. If you haven't been, we're a regional history museum. We're located just a stone's throw, well, a little more than stone's throw. We're in downtown Springdale. We're open Monday through Saturday from 10 to 5, and admission is free. And what I think we maybe specialize in is the story of everyday Ozark folks. And a lot of what I'm going to show you here today are photos of everyday Ozark folks. And can you think of any famous people that have lived in Northwest Arkansas? Besides Aubrey Shepherd. Besides Aubrey. Aubrey is kind of famous. Well, when I was a kid, see, he's a lot older than me. When I was a kid, I used to love to read the Northwest Arkansas Times sports page, and he had an outdoor column and kind of, I loved reading that, Aubrey. You must have just been a kid yourself. All right, some famous people that have lived in Northwest Arkansas. Come on, anybody. Sam Walton, Bill and Hillary Clinton, J. William Fulbright,
Darrell Stone,
Edward Drill Stone,
Faye Jones.
Faye Jones. What's that store that starts with a W? Wall. Oh, you might have said
That's who I meant. Who did you think?
yeah, I did. She said Sam because they're on a first name basis. So there have been lots of famous people, big name, world-renowned people that have called Northwest Arkansas home. They make it to the history books and they make it to the front page of the newspaper, and their story is preserved. And what about those everyday folks? What about those folks out in Madison County who just lived their life as farmers? That's what most of us just lived our lives in a small town or going to get up and going to work every day, sending the kids to school. Those are the stories that we really want to honor and preserve. So today, what I want to talk about, and I told John King I don't have a lot to say in this program. I may be fooling you now, but I just want to show you some pictures from our museum collection of landscaping. And we have the largest photograph collection in the state as far as photos that are held by a museum or an archive. And they're a great resource. And every time, it's like I can look at them different every time depending on the subject. And in this case, I just went grabbing some photos with the thought of what struck me about this photo that has to do with landscaping. I can't tell you a lot of the history behind it, or maybe I won't even be able to tell you a lot about the landscaping, but I bet y'all I would look for your input in it. And it's mostly rural settings because historically that's what we mostly have been. I have shied away, and I don't know if on purpose or if I just didn't get that far in looking at the photos, but there's not a lot of city dwelling, high style homes in this program. And the name of the program is that. Can y'all see that? An adjustment to circumstances. Vernacular is a fancy word for what's common in the place you're talking about. So, and there's a woman named Jean Sizemore who has studied, let me get that title off there. There. You can see that photo. A woman named Jean Sizemore who wrote a book about everyday houses, cabins, and architecture in the Ozarks. And she talked about how there are two different kinds of landscape from an architectural standpoint. She said there's the kind of established towns that are plotted out, and you have lots that you sell, and there are, bankers and lawyers and well-to-do folks that live in these towns, and their yards are very delineated, and their houses are built just so. They don't have a lot of outbuildings. And then you go out in the country, and you find that people have to adjust to their circumstances. Like this mill was built where it is because there's a water source nearby. This little log cabin that's hard to see has a nice corn. It's a flat place right there, so they can have a little crop of corn. And I don't know if you can see back in here, but that's being forced. The trees are being cut down. So there's a economic source in the trees. So in the rural Ozarks, in our landscape, we adjust to whatever our circumstances happen to be with the land that we have. Now here's what I want you to remember. This is what we have to adjust to. That looks like a flower garden. I talk to a lot of folks in Bella Vista. Do a lot of programs up in Bella Vista, and I hear this over and over and over again. People that retire here and they just cannot get over the rocks. They breed overnight. They breed overnight?
Yes, they do.
I had one lady tell me that as a kid, she was, her job growing up, one of their jobs as kids growing up here in the Ozarks was they'd get out with their daddy. He'd have the wagon in front of them, and the kids would just go along in the plowed field and pick up rocks and throw it in the wagon. And she'd say, and the next year we'd have to do it again. So it's a challenge. Our landscapes are just our natural landscape is a challenge. I've organized these photos fairly much in chronological order. So we'll go from old to new. But this is just a quintessential Ozark farmstead. A single pen, a one-room log cabin, but look around there. It's a clean yard, and that swept probably, literally swept. Grass is scraped off. The kids would get a buck brush or a cedar limb and use that as a broom and literally keep that beat down dirt. And that was that was the landscaping, cleaning the yard. And you had a fence, not to fence your livestock in, but to fence them away out. Livestock roamed free, chickens, pigs, cows. So you just built a fence to keep yourself protected from the livestock rooting around. But you see, there's not a lot of foundation plantings. There's no foundation plantings. There's no trees. My goodness, they're living in the wilderness. They want to carve out a place in that wilderness. They're not going to carve out that little spot and then stick a tree right there that would just be anathema to their thinking. This is a fine home. But look, as far from landscaping, you see that vine? There's some kind of vine growing up the front. They're by the window too. This is hard, it's hard to tell, but when you look at the original photo, this is some kind of flower, maybe a tiger lily, I don't know. Historically, what you would see in the rural Ozarks, maybe rose bush, tiger lilies, jonquils. What am I forgetting?
Hollyhocks
Hollyhocks, yeah, hollyhocks. Where would you see the hollyhocks?
against the house. Like
Against the
that.
house? Outhouse. Around the outhouse? By the way, that, what do you think that building is? Smokehouse. One time I can always tell when somebody ain't from here. What do y'all think that building is? And somebody piped up, that's the outhouse. Probably the smokehouse or an outdoor kitchen. So in this case, they have some eye for landscaping. You got to think too, how much time did they have to spend on landscaping from just the point of view of having something pretty? They spent a lot of time working in the soil. They spent a lot of time gardening so they would have food to eat. And that's not to say they didn't have any time for this, but you see, their leisure time was different than what we think of today.
Susan,
Yeah.
just to the right of the door, to the right of the vine, there's something, right?
Yeah,
What is that?
I don't know what that is.
Oh,
Do y'all have any idea? It appears to be just a wooden pedestal. Is it to set a plant on? I don't know.
Tied your horse.
so the horse is over there on the left, but.
Oh, okay.
So I have no idea what that is. And again, please, if you see things in these photos, pipe up because I guarantee you that you'll point out something that I've never seen before.
Well, compared to this picture and the one before that, the one before had a lot of kids. This looks like grandma and grandpa, so they have more time to garden.
That's right. That's right. So this is before do you think this is before we send the kids off to stay with grandma and grandpa? I know. And also, the measure of affluence. They've got a brick chimney. Bricks cost money.
And a window.
And glass in the windows. Curtains. And if you can see the picture better, she's got a really pretty coverlet on the bed. So you're absolutely right. This is an older established family.
Susan,
Yeah.
did very many have root cellars?
It looks like a cellar up there.
You think that maybe a cellar? You know, historically, I don't read so much or even have more recent older folks tell me about root cellars as they tell me about just burying. They would bury their crop. They would bury, dig a hole, line it with straw, and then just bury their potatoes and their crops that would over with apples, put them with hay, and just have them where you could just grab in there and get maybe something under the house. But as far as a big root cellar, not so much. Although my grandma's house, which was built right after the Civil War, had a really nice cellar.
Grandmother's house had a root cellar. It was
Yeah.
away from the house,
Separate?
separate. And I would have said it was built probably 1900.
Okay.
1920.
Whereabouts?
Harrison.
Harrison. So yeah, I'm more going just on my personal experience than yeah, that's
But
those
you know,
separate
it
kind of
wasn't-
cellars. So how did it was something you could walk down into?
Oh, yeah, and they built steps, well, yeah, because my grandmother was afraid of storms, so.
Yeah.
If there was a storm, you went to the root cellar, so, and she kind of had steps down, and then I don't remember now what it was, but she'd put boards for seats around, and then there was shelving, and I always know that if you didn't like to put your feet on the ground, you like to scrunch up on the seat so that your feet weren't.
Were you ever scared to go down in there?
I was just scared.
I was always scared to go in my grandma's cellar. I was always afraid something was in there.
There were cellars.
My grandmother had a root cellar in Hazel Valley, and she'd have to.
What family name?
Dennis.
We gotta talk.
But my dad had said she had to kill copperheads. There'd be a copperhead down in my root cellar, so it was a scary thing to go through.
And just last week, I went with our collections manager. We had a call from a family in Fayetteville who have an old farmhouse that's been in the family for many years, and it's just turned into a rent house, but they're gonna dispose of the property. So they said, y'all wanna come out and look in the barn and see if there's anything you want? We went out there and, they pointed to the cellar and said, do you wanna go in the cellar? Oh, yeah. And they said, well, it's full of water right now. Mosquitoes, snake, no. So, no. Interesting picture. Look at, now this is a thought it out thing. Look at that line of trees. They thought about leaving that tree line, and you see it's cedar tree, I can tell what that is. But not much else. There's some chickens roaming around back there.
Is that a two-story house?
No, it's a really tall little one-room cabin, but it's probably got a loft in it. But it's a pretty steep pitch of a roof.
Is the roof curved or not?
It looks like it has kind of a slope to it, doesn't
I
it?
think it's called rotten.
Rotten?
Let's think.
No, it's a chimney. The chimney is a
Looks like it might be a brick chimney. And actually, this Webster family out in Elm Springs, they were fairly well-to-do folks.
Do you think those trees are fruit trees that they planted?
It could be. That's what, a lot of times, and you'll see this in these pictures, when you do see a tree close to the house, it looks like a fruit tree. So it could be. Like that. That to me looks like a black cherry. Look at that striped bark. Like the wild cherry, you know? I don't know. But again, you see, now there's a tiny little flower bed right there where she's lined some rocks. What do y'all think about that tree? I think it's I think it's some kind of like a black cherry. Look at the little, you know, and you can eat those little black cherries, those little wild cherries. It's a lot of effort for not much, but there's a lot going on here. So here is a tree. I can't tell what it is, but it's really close to the house. There's some kind of planting right here and right here. And then look at this, looks like maybe a rose bush, but look at that. Is that what it's growing up, that woody trellis? I don't know what that is. It disappears out of the picture before I see the top of it. But it's a pretty substantial pole. He keeps his ladder by the chimney because, you know, that you got a chimney with a fire in it, with a wooden house. You had a danger of fire quite often coming off to your roof, the spark, so you a lot of times keep that chimney or ladder close to by. But so a little bit of landscaping going on there.
Those be tomato plants that overlap.
Right, maybe so.
What is the appendage on the back behind the
Right there.
fireplace?
That looks to be a porch.
There's a board on it.
Yeah, a lot of times these old houses, they would add on it as an L or that back porch of some kind that was more utilitarian. And of course, your back area was utilitarian, your front area, if you, for some, like a house like this, that's kind of a fancy home, at least more so than a rural log cabin, but your front area, people kind of had the knowledge that that's kind of your formal area, and your back area is where you do all your work and you keep your more of a utilitarian. So she's probably got buckets, and that might be a little bucket hanging right there. There's a fine home. This is an extraordinary home in its history. It still stands. It's out near Prairie Grove, and the family kept the records. They have every building record, every construction record that was made when that house was built. They still have it in the family. It's amazing. But fine farm home. This is an example of what a very well-to-do farm family, the kind of house they might have. And you see, there's some symmetry going on, that tree and that tree, but no foundation plantings. So when you go to these historic homes around here, and just look and see, there shouldn't be many foundation plantings around these old cabins and such. And even these fine homes, that was just against your nature. You're trying to get away from the wilderness. And, you know, that's putting a bunch of plants there. Now, I'm going to say that, and then I'm going to show you some pictures that's exactly opposite. So, but I'll say in a broad way.
But wouldn't that just also encourage wildlife and snakes to put
Oh, yeah.
foundation planting? And I mean, wasn't that one of the, I mean, I guess just my mom's comments, just from being a kid in the 30s and 40s, oh no, that needs to be bush hog, we need that clean, we need to have that clean.
Yeah, there was a
But she
different,
wants-
it was a different attitude.
And I always thought it was partly because cleaner it was, or you really probably wouldn't have as many snakes, or you would definitely see them
Varmints.
before you went
Yeah,
out.
you wouldn't have to be varmints. Beautiful home. Look at this, beautiful. This home still stands. This is in Elkins. It is just, I guess that would be north of the Elkins Elementary School. It's, if you're going on Highway 16, the house does not face the highway. This faces Highway 16 and it's set back. Beautiful. This is a spectacular farmstead. Well-to-do family. Few little stick trees. There it looks like a cedar tree. No foundation planting. Isn't that fantastic? Love that picture. And look at how close the outbuildings are to the house. So you think, oh boy, flies, bugs, smells. But a cedar tree was pretty, I see that a cedar tree a lot in these pictures. And you know, chickens like to get up in the cedar trees. And I read that Vance Randolph, folklore, said that cedar trees keep the bugs off the chickens, mites and such. Now, I don't know if that's true or not. Some of you, John King, can you attest to that?
I have no idea.
You don't know anything about chickens? If it was grass.
Well, one of the reasons they didn't have grass was to keep the snakes away.
So guess what? Now, you know John's an agronomist. He just validated what you said. One of the reasons they didn't have grass, keep the snakes away.
Think that's why they didn't have plantings around the house? I mean, even the old matches homes in Mississippi didn't have plantings around them.
And those
No.
fine homes.
Beautiful mansions, you know,
Yeah.
they didn't have plantings around
No, maybe flowers up the walkway, but not.
Susan, you would think that they would have their garden or vegetables close by so no varmints would eat them close to the house.
Yeah.
And like herbs and stuff, keep insects away, and they use that for medicine.
Yeah.
That's all they had.
Right. And so probably in back, right in back around here, they had what some might call a kitchen garden, like you're talking about. You keep your vegetables and herbs close enough to the house, it's easy access, and you would have a fence around that garden to keep the chickens out, and you maybe put the fence around it where the palings or the rails were kind of going it this way, so the chickens couldn't fly up and get over them. So keep the cows and pigs out. So yeah, you're right, a garden would have been close by in the back of the house somewhere.
And there would have been a lot fewer deer than we have now.
No deer.
No
In the pioneer era, there were deer. They all got hunted out. You came in with the timber industry in the late the early 1900s, and the Ozarks were clear cut. Deer had no habitat. You ask anybody that grew up in the Ozarks during the Depression, and they will tell you there was not a deer to be found. Now we got them in our backyard in town.
Like birds.
Yeah.
Look at the fence in itself, it's very unusual in Arkansas, compared to Arkansas construction.
That's right, that's a fancy fence, and look how they go here to the little, those are machine made or rails.
So what do you think are two small animals behind the fence, or am I just seeing?
No, you got good eyes. That's a turkey. Right, you see that turkey up there? And there's a dog.
And what about the
These are, were you talking about these two old maids? I would have to go back and look at the original photo to see if that is an animal, but I definitely remember that that's a turkey, that's a dog. And it's fascinating to me that you notice the placement of, obviously this is a professionally made photo. They know they're getting the traveling photographers come and offer to take the picture. And the placement, why do they have to stand
They
in the
weren't
way?
paying for the picture, it was that man.
And look at what they brought into the picture. What are they proud of? Well, this little child, that wagon, she's got a little teddy bear. Look at her doll in the rocking chair.
There must have been dependents on her.
So I don't know if that, somebody said, well, maybe those are like servants or something. I don't know. I think they're probably just some kind of family. Or just, yeah.
Distant relatives.
You know, you're extended family. You have grandma, grandpa, aunts, uncles living with you. You didn't ship your old timers off to the nursing home.
Just put them on the front porch. Probably.
Very clean home, very well kept. Farm, little farmhouse. See their rain barrels? Here's some scattered trees around. Looks like a cedar tree there. But look how clean that yard is. And look at, now see how the house is built up on rock pillars. Keep that wooden floor off the ground so it won't rot. Also, that's a good place for your dogs to waller and your hogs to waller. So it's a lot of function to being built that way.
It gives you a way of preventing or stopping termites too.
Termite damage, boy, that reminds me, I had my Terminex inspection, and I just go round and round with those people. I don't need to be editorializing about Terminex, but man, that's a racket. So if I put my house above on rocks, maybe I could avoid even paying.
Then you have to crawl around and break up the tunnels.
So you still have to do your own maintenance.
Get a hog to root out the
There you
snakes.
go.
There, yeah.
It looks like the house behind is a log cabin, and this part is newer and has been added.
Yeah, you got definitely, here's the original house, and this has been added on, that look, that chimney. Yeah, over here, yeah. So that could be an outbuilding. Your barns, your smokehouses were all tended to be the log and tended to stay that way as log buildings. Sawed lumber built this house. But here, you often see a kitchen added on as an L or as an addition, and with that chimney, that makes me think that that's the kitchen. And, oh, see here, she's got a little wooden railing or shelf. They put flowers on there. That might be, oh, that's a reflection in the window. See, I don't know what that is. See that plant growing up there? That kind of looks like a tomato. It might be tomatoes, but I don't know.
When was tomatoes first grown from vegetables?
You know, one of my coworkers and I have this ongoing discussion, and maybe y'all can put it to rest one way or the other. There's this story. I thought that tomatoes at one time were considered poison. But my coworker says that is folklore, that is not true. No. So, yeah. I know I've read old oral history interviews done in the 1930s, talking to people that were elders back in the 1930s, and they substantiated this story. They said, we always heard that tomatoes were poison, but we started growing them in their lifetime. But again, my coworker says those are people that are just parroting this folklore that's been handed down. There's no fact to show you. There's nothing you can see in the literature of the day that says tomatoes are poison. So I don't know. Yeah.
Maybe those two ladies in the back were the tasters.
Oh, and that other picture.
See if it's poison or not.
Well, tomatoes are in the Solanaceae family, and there's a lot of poisonous, like nightshade, and I think in one stage, I'm not sure that it is poisonous.
You're right, they are part of the nightshade family.
After the frost, they can do you like poison ivy.
Tomatoes? Really?
In one stage.
Well, the plant itself is really noxious to your head.
Potatoes were considered poisonous because people originally thought they ate the stuff on the top, which are like little tomatoes. They didn't realize they ate the root tuber in the ground.
Yeah, okay.
And they are.
I think we should be considering the possibility of beans.
Beans?
Because that was so much a part of their staple. They could eat it green, they could eat it, they could dry it, and then they would have it like for the next year. And so, well, I don't think probably that is, if we look at the pictures, I suspect that we will see lots of.
And what I need to have y'all all do is come to the museum and we'll look at these photos with our magnifying glasses and you'll be able to tell a lot better than in these pictures. But the fact that it's a thought out planting and they have built this wooden structure to support it.
That's not a very large plot to keep
Right, well, that's a good point too.
That has to be something.
And it's right at the front of the house. I mean, it's where everybody's gonna come.
Yeah, they have to be proud of it. Can you tell me where Kings River is? I'm not.
Upper Kings River, that's, in this particular case, this is near the Madison-Newton County line near Kingston. Does that help you any?
Harrison, Huntsville, is that
That way, toward Huntsville, yeah.
Look at that baby, feel
Back there.
That's
Yes.
It's probably a boy.
That, yeah, and that, whew, that is.
Because I have pictures of my dad dresses like that.
And you know, I don't know. Somebody, oh, that's a christening gown. That's really fancy.
Christening.
I don't know how much christening was practiced in Arkansas Ozarks. And I know we have some christening gowns in our museum collection, but they're mostly from, they're from Winslow, where there was a strong Episcopal church, or they're from the towns. Get out in the country, you have the Baptists, and the Cumberland Presbyterians, and the Methodists, and then later on the Church of Christ, or the kind of disciples of Christ. So christening is not that common in a lot of the old country religions, but that they are showing out with that. All right, now see, I just said a minute ago they want to keep the landscape, they want to keep the woods away from their house. But look, they're just letting it all grow up.
There's always weirdos.
Well, the old grandma and her.
Yeah, there's grandma back there.
The whole home is more decorative.
Yes.
And so that goes along with the landscape.
Very good point. But you see, they've got things growing all the way around and growing up tall. Now, you don't have a lawnmower.
So is this rural?
That's the
This
lawnmower
is-
right there.
All I know is it's Benton County. We don't have any further identification than that. But in 1900, my guess, and he's got a nice white horse, my guess is it's rural. It's not downtown Bentonville.
But I mean, you're a little tiny.
Yeah, but it looks to me to be a farmstead home rather than a town home.
Except that it's got all that fancy trim on it.
Yeah, that fancy trim is, that's really fancy. Of course, that stuff, by 1900, you're starting to see some house plans, and you certainly can have millwork like that now. You had the Van Winkle Mill in Benton County that was very famous, so this is certainly a departure from the log cabins that we've been looking at, or the.
That doesn't look like a workhorse.
Yeah, he looks like a riding.
Do you think he could be a circuit rider or a circuit minister rider? I mean, you know, the Methodist.
He could be. I
Because
know.
that looks like a riding horse.
It's a beautiful horse, and the fact, what
That the
we
ground's all
can say
grown
for
up,
sure is
no one's there to work
that he's
it.
real proud of that horse.
Yes.
Yeah, now that's not a bad point, Vandy. Maybe he is, well, obviously Grandpa and Grandma
Can't help.
can't take care, maybe they can, we're just speculating. But maybe they can't help take care of the grounds, and maybe he's off on that horse riding around.
Does he have his little vest on and everything?
Yeah, so that could be. Well, look at that, now you talk about fence, look at all that's going on here. it's a tree, and if you try to zoom in on some of those leaves, it kind of, it may be some kind of an oak tree. If you look at that leaf right there. That, to me, looks like a castor bean. Can't be sure. But they sure got a lot of work to do on that fence.
Is there one man and all those women?
Two boys and a man.
Look at that, you're right. And look, they have a gutter. That's interesting to have a house that early with a gutter.
There's a rain barrel. Rain barrel underneath.
Maybe a rain barrel behind there. You hope so, or some kind of, something to catch you.
Bet it's a shower.
I did not, see, I love this. I love y'all looking at these this closely because I hadn't really keyed in on the fact that there's only one thing.
Definitely a rain barrel.
Well, maybe it's the older, maybe the oldest children, oldest girl.
Yeah, that could be a couple of families that did it.
I think just a couple of generations, you know, the oldest daughters maybe.
Well, is that a man on the left, on the,
That's a boy right there.
right of the post, there's another person, isn't there? Is that a man?
I think it's the man.
That's a woman.
But at the end of the house, in the white?
No. That's a little boy. Looks like that maybe.
But there's a man holding a boy. No. At the end of the
That's a
house?
woman.
Beyond. Go over.
That?
Yeah.
That's a man.
Look that way. Now that skirt, that's a woman.
Oh, I'll be darned.
We're not gonna go
Okay, okay.
there. Here's a beautiful dog trot cabin with that open breezeway. Look, cedar trees, symmetry of the cedar trees on either side of that breezeway. There's a well with a little roof over. You know where this is? That at the time the picture was made, that was west of Fayetteville. You know where Harps is on Garden?
Oh, my.
That's where it is. Awesome. Isn't that awesome? I live over on that side of town. Every time I drive by that Harps, I think it is.
Wow.
This is a very well-to-do family. The Blackburns were the ones that the Blackburn family started War Eagle Mill. And when you go to the War Eagle Craft Fair, you're on the ancestral Blackburn land. And the Blackburns, the first Blackburn, Sylvanus and his wife Catherine, had lots of kids, and this is one of the sons. And the woman's one of my favorite names, Missouri Ellen Gideon Blackburn.
I have a great aunt, something that's named Missouri.
Love that. But they were, so you're looking at, we know, because we know a lot about the family, that they were fairly well to do. There, what is that right there? Plant. Yucca. Yucca's an old time plant. And here's some little stick kind of things growing up. There's something right there. Yeah, a lot of these photos are made in wintertime, so I guess that's maybe when they had time to get them.
Somebody knitting or playing an instrument.
She's playing the banjo. Or she's at least holding it. But again, why did she get relegated to the court?
She's not immediate family.
And you see there, and look at this little structure. That's the style, but was that for climbing over the fence? Yeah, it's right up against the, and there's the steps. But you see, look, no foundation planting that we can see.
And the baby has a long dress.
Yeah, here's the long dress. Little boys would wear long shirts until they were, potty house trained. potty trained and old enough to wear overalls and pants and take care of themselves. And I bet y'all have read this. It's not peculiar to the Ozarks, but I have read about women in the Ozarks telling that a good thing about those long shirts that the little boys would wear, or the little babies, but you could, if mama was working, she could pin that tail of that shirt under the bedstead, under the leg of the bed, and then the baby could only go so far, and she could go on about her work. Look how close the smokehouse is to the back porch. There's some kind of a bucket. Look at this little, this just looks muddy to me. Now you think, ladies, think about those women wearing those long skirts and those just dragging in the dirt and the mud.
That's why I don't understand why they swept the yards, because I just think it would be just one continual.
Yeah,
Then
but
they
our
swept it till it was hard.
it
like a
was hard as
surface,
concrete,
so
yeah.
They were getting rid of all the.
And our concept of cleanliness and hygiene and privacy is totally different than what their concept of cleanliness, hygiene, and privacy. They do have, looks like a wooden plank that maybe they thought, well, we need something to walk on before, so we don't track a lot of mud in. There's one little stick of a plant right here. Nothing else. Here's a little shrubby thing. Now here's some beautiful landscape. Now, here's the thing about this, and look at the symmetry going down.
yeah.
And that looks like some kind of, is that lilies or something? There's some long, stately, maybe iris. And look at the, hard to see, but these vines are growing all the way across the Emory Way. Maybe a rose bush. So where was McGuiretown? McGuiretown is out from Elkins, like you turn on Highway 74 to go to Wesley. Does that ring a bell? Near Elkins?
Okay, now during this period of time, that early 1900s, would there have been very many immigrants in this area?
Well, this is an immigrant family. That's what's fascinating. By 1904, you have immigrants from Tommytown that are the Italians that are fairly new here. They come in 1898.
So couldn't that be the reason for that?
That is the reason. These are, I want to say they are Swiss or Belgian. It's not the old Scots-Irish that so many of our Ozark pioneers are. It might be German.
You can tell by the lace
That's-
cutouts in the window that it's.
Yeah, that is exactly the key. When you know that backstory, they are coming with a different influence. They are new immigrants that are coming with a different background than the 1830s Scots-Irish pioneers. Exactly right. It's a pretty smart bunch. Look at that. I think that's a tree of heaven, that scourge. Have y'all ever tried to buy a tree of heaven? Have you noticed that it's got a really weird smell to it?
Yeah.
It'll choke you. The
Yeah.
smell is so weird.
It's mimosa, isn't it?
No.
No, it's Ailanthus is the genus. At least it was when I was in college. But you see, at least they have made some effort to have a tree there.
They've got a sidewalk.
Yeah, a little sidewalk. Yeah, that appears to be a gutter. Nice fence.
Were gutters to protect the ground, or were they just to collect water?
Well, Susan, on our house, when our grandmother lived there, she had those spout, and it's a cistern that's under the house.
So it's to collect, was that at that time was the thought we're collecting water?
Yes.
Rather than we're getting the water away from the house, we're collecting water. Yeah, I know my grandma always had a big metal rain barrel.
But you know, I mean, you could dig sometimes a long way to get a well to get good water, so collecting water from a system was a practical.
Right, exactly.
Having additional water.
And it's all about being practical. This way of life is all about what's practical. What I love in the landscape here is this right here. Can you tell what that is? What I think it is.
It's a bottle
I think it's a
tree.
bottle tree.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have any bottles on. I think it's destined to become a bottle.
It's on cedar.
Yeah, exactly. That's the best part. What, that?
That is foreign saddle.
Yeah, they're showing out with that saddle. Yeah, that's a real fancy saddle. That's
Now,
not.
was this a city house?
This is in Huntsville, so yes, this is a town family. The Oslam family in Huntsville were not wealthy, but fairly well-to-do.
The kids are all there.
Their kids are barefoot, yeah. Look at these, I don't know if those are twin girls, maybe not, but their dolls are twins. Do you know the folklore about bottle trees? This is the right time of year to be telling them. Who has a bottle tree? Anybody? Well, you will never be plagued with witches.
It works.
You never had any witches bottle.
People get one if they need to. We can all join in
Yes.
to add additional.
So, how do you know if you have a problem with witches? Well, your cow quits giving milk, just mysteriously. And then you find out that your little boy has been plaguing the old maid down the road, been throwing rocks at her window or something. Oh, that's why the cow quit giving milk. Or your crop just mysteriously died. There's unexplained things happen. You're being troubled by a witch. And you generally have a suspicion who it might be. So, what you can do is put up a bottle tree, and it needs to be close to where the visitors will come to your house, because a witch, when she comes to your house, there's this thing about witches, they got to count everything. So she's going to see that bottle tree, and she's going to feel compelled to count every bottle on that tree. And if you get enough bottles on there, she's not going to fool with it. She's just going to move on to somebody else. And Anne is the testimony. She has never been plagued with witches, so y'all get out there and get your bottle tree.
Further south you go, the more you'll see.
What do we got right here?
Olive. Or maybe okra.
Yeah, it's like here's some flowers. This is a very thick kind of vine. I kind of think that's hollyhock. Now, we know about this This is Dr. Alonzo Everding Quinn. He was a doctor. So, okay, we know that being a physician, like Dr. Woods, you have all this extra time and extra money. You can have these plantings and such. So
He still has a rock chimney.
he does have a rock chimney. It's a nice cupstone chimney, but it is rock. Chimney. That I have gotten to saying that. That's how my grandma said it. Last week I said chimney in front of this big group of people. Chimney. But look at the grass. It's pretty tall.
So on the second story.
Yeah. Is the door open? Yeah, that door's open. Yeah, what that is, there's a staircase going, I'm going off of how my grandma's house was, and there's, this type of house style is called an I, like the letter I, and it's very symmetrical. You have a room here, a room here, a room here, a room here, a central entrance, and there's a staircase that goes up, and right up here is like a little, just a little hallway or open area that the stairway landing ends and connects these two rooms, and there's a door. You go out onto a court. Yeah.
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 Is the stairs inside or outside?
Inside. Some scrubby, lots of little shrubby things. I don't know what all these shrubby things are that we see.
You can see why the roof for the.
Yeah, look, not an expert roofing job.
window side first and then add it on.
Yeah. The chimneys are different, right? So this one, this is the living area, and that looks to be the kitchen area. It made sense, and that's an open breezeway, or the dog trot. They call it a dog trot because that's where the dogs like to lay down. That's where there will be a breeze flowing through there. But it made sense to have your kitchen separate from your living area for heat and for safety. All right, look at this. Now, forget everything I said about clearing out the landscape. They are just living in it. They are in the middle of it.
They still have a mosquito problem.
But look at her different little bits of old granite ware, probably worn a hole in it, so she's turned it into a flower pot. How many of y'all's grandmas did that, or mamas did that? So she's got her flowers lined up here.
I do that now because my grandmother did it.
Yeah, it's wonderful to carry on those traditions, those very simple traditions.
Now, because it's so grown up, would you assume that they didn't have any, small animals, chickens or sheep or goats or something?
Well, I guess.
You know,
Go ahead.
if it was a downtown area, they probably could use landscaping, but out rural.
Yeah, and even though this is in Cincinnati, the Western Washington County community of Cincinnati, that's still a very small settlement. So even if they are in the middle of the settlement, it's still rural. Looking at the house, it looks pretty worn. It looks like there's not a lot of time or attention being paid to maintenance. Yeah.
That's sitting on the edge. There's the cellar door that goes up underneath it, the house. The fence, this is being shot from in front of the fence.
Yeah, here's the fence.
See, there's the fence through there, and that house goes up, and it's sitting on the up part with the cellar door underneath it.
Where is this with the cellar? Over here?
Right here.
By the tree.
Oh, in there, in this area?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
It could just be woodbine. That's on a hill.
It's like a ridge line. The house is set up over top.
Yeah. So, it's like all of us. You can't say that everybody in this room does their landscaping the same way or has the same eye for what they consider to be beautiful or manicured or not.
Yeah, but that, in this area, I think it's almost more across, they must not have owned a dog, chicken, goat, or they wouldn't.
I sure can't imagine the chicken getting through that, yeah. Yeah, he knows that, yeah, that's true, he knows the other side of the house.
Well, they wouldn't have no picture.
Isn't that great? Look at our rain barrel. Look at this beautiful, here we're all about making rain barrels, and we have these workshops. And just want us all to remember, we didn't come up with that idea. It pays to think back. There are a lot of things people before us did that we ought to be doing now. Look at this great. And look at the puppies. Can you see they got puppies? That house is still standing in Johnson. You know where James in the Mill is in Johnson, that fancy restaurant and hotel. Well, just east of that, there's a red brick house, the old Johnson house. That's it. Are we doing okay on time? I have really been, y'all okay? If anybody needs to leave, you go ahead. I won't hurt my feelings. So this, look at how this, is that severe pruning or what has happened there? And then they've got some pines, maybe morning glory to shade, look perhaps for shade.
Were pipelines growing here then? Or did they have pipelines?
I don't know historically. Does anybody know, are pipe vines historically something we had here?
They used to plant them on the north side of the porch
Yeah.
to shade the porch. They can take some shade.
Yeah. Now this is beautiful. This is a beautiful home in Springdale. In town, this is a town home, but this is starting to remind me of my grandma's with the big. My grandma had these huge elevators. But they have definitely got some attention to landscaping going on here. Yeah, wire fence,
Whitewash, no.
whitewash, this is a, yeah, beautiful, beautiful home. That house is still standing, it's not far from the Shiloh Museum, and it's in fairly good condition. But here's a house at the same time period in Springdale, another townhome, and look, nothing. You don't see any foundation plantings, you see trees.
That's a winter picture too. You might have had those.
I think some perennials then, we're talking annuals and maybe perennials, some herbaceous, but not woody,
She's got a barn back
not
there.
woody plants. Okay, I'll go with that. That looks like a fruit tree to me back there in the back, the way it's kind of. Here's this is a fine farmstead of a family that were well-known fruit growers in Springdale. But you see nice trees, you can see grass now. We got grass growing, we got something lining the fence. We don't know if that's by choice or just because they haven't.
Where was that house?
That was east of Fayetteville, east of Springdale, kind of along Old Wire Road near, not too far from Fitzgerald Station in that area.
So where does the picture come from? I mean, why did someone, I guess I'm curious why someone wrote on the picture.
Well, the photographer probably wrote on that, and W.B. Brogdon was a well-known fruit man in Springdale, and he might have been, this might have been a picture postcard that he had several made so he could send out to his friends and colleagues and potential business associates. This is over in Newton County near Boxley. But what struck me by this picture landscape-wise is look how they have just denuded that hillside. They're cutting it for timber. Huge porch up on big pillars. There's the wash hanging on the fence. I'm wondering if that metal barrel is for chickens or maybe dogs, maybe like a house for an animal. But here's the cedar tree up next to the house. Now, 1914. Here's a family in 1914 that is living in a log cabin. And again, you talk about no privacy. Look at how many people are in that family. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 people in a one-room log cabin.
Susan, you know, now when you drive rural and you see a whole bunch of daffodils, you know that was a homestead.
Absolutely.
But I haven't seen any daffodils.
I haven't, but a good point is that, as she pointed out, a lot of these photos are made in the wintertime. So we're not seeing a lot of the vegetation that will come up. But yes, daffodils out in the middle of nowhere today, that's a pretty sure key of it being an old home site.
Those are mules, not horses.
Mules, look at those mules. Like, you think that might be some kind of little, you know, cherries were grown here fairly. Apples and peaches were the big fruits as far as tree fruits, but you know, in the late 1800s, early 1900s, you see cherries mentioned fairly often. Here's our Tawny Town picture for Gail Penalto. This is the rectory at Tawny Town. That's Father Bandini, the founder of Tawny Town. And now you look at this beautiful landscape. There's our yuccas. Father Bandini was a well-known scholar of agriculture. He was talking to the university and keeping up on the latest agricultural methods and then passing that information on to the Tawny Town farmers. So it makes sense that in other words, he had an interest in growing things. So it makes sense that his place of living would have some nice landscape. I don't know. Do you think those are fruit trees? There's the rain barrel. But look at how clean the ground is, the yard.
Looks like they've got a cellar over there.
Yeah, there's the cellar right there. Yeah.
And actually, I had an aunt that was solar just like that, but it was attached.
Attached and you.
But it was at that slight angle.
Yep. I'm glad you had pointed out, I always learn one big light bulb thing, and you pointing out that a lot of these pictures are wintertime, and that there probably are annuals and perennials that would really dress it up at the right time of year. Well, seriously, look at these vines growing here. It's hard to see with this, but she's actually got them trained in kind of a fashion on this side.
Could this side, the vine be hops?
I don't know.
They grew a
Hops.
lot of hops.
I don't know historically. Gail, have any insight into hops historically?
Because of Hurry Grove, they have hops.
Hops
Hurry
were
Grove,
they using them to
they
make beer?
The hops.
Hops is, yeah, hops is a vine. There's the outbuilding. There's some, now here's some, looks like little jonquils in the far front. If you've ever been to Pettigrew, Arkansas, South Madison County, which, boy, there's a lot of bikers going through there today on the ride. That is Highway 16 right there. The Crawfords, Charles Crawford was a banker who moved to Pettigrew, Arkansas in the early 1900s when it was a boom town, a timber boom town. So he was a banker. So this is the home of a banker in South Madison County. And there is our cedar tree, little cedar shrubby thing. But here, this is a shelf, several shelves like a ladder of house plants that his wife has grown in.
They have a screen door.
They have a nice screen door.
Yeah, one that goes flat.
But look, it's kind of warped looking, you know. But to be, I mean, you're there, right there. The road is right at your step. Of course, you're not having a lot of traffic on that road. They had cars in Pettigrew. You know, there's this stereotype of us in the Ozarks that we are backwards and cut off from civilization and didn't know what was going on in the world. Well, Pettigrew, Arkansas, the Frisco Railroad went as far as Pettigrew. It was the end of the line. They built a railroad out there to haul the timber out. So anything you could get on the railroad could be had in Pettigrew. There were a couple of people that bought cars, had them shipped out on the railroad, had them unloaded off the rail car, and then said, well, what are we going to do with them now? There's no place to drive. When they had the most use of their automobiles back then was when the creek went dry, the creek bed, that's what they would use as the road. This is a fantastic photo. The story behind this photo is amazing. This is in Fayetteville. Look at the beautiful landscaping. Look at how, that's Wandering Jew. Very clear to see. And how he's got it on a stick tripod with a chain holding it. Here's some kind of evergreen in an old, looks like an old metal pot of some kind. Here's some flowers, or a flower pot. But look, maybe wisteria. All right, the reason this picture was made in 1933, this is the home of Tom Rogers in Fayetteville. That picture was made because the Fayetteville Beautification Committee awarded Tom Rogers first prize for home improvement in his landscape under unfavorable conditions. Now, let me tell you what they define as his unfavorable condition. That he is an African American. Isn't that incredible? And look, it's just beautiful. Look at this. What do you think that's very clear. Now that's not pipevine, is it? Pipevine has a different kind of thing.
Yeah.
Morning glory with a
What part of Fayetteville is this?
well, that would have been the historic African American community. So
Toward near the
Behind
Veterans Cemetery up in that
yeah,
way?
yeah,
Silver something or other.
yeah. Tin Cup is what.
Spout Creek.
But just an amazing. I mean, when you think of the history, the backstory of this photo, it's just kind of stunning.
Well, up by War Eagle, I stayed at a house that was gonna be torn down, but it was an old farmhouse. Well, that didn't have many plants except jonquils and whatnot, but across the way was the shack that their help stayed, and they had a lot of fruit bushes and edible things stuck around, not in any kind of landscaped way, but, you know, probably for necessity.
function, yeah, yeah.
Stuck any little seed in the ground.
Right, yeah. This is the idyllic. Now, here's what we all imagine. When we think of the Ozark traditional way of life, we think of this beautiful little log cabin with this perfect little fence. But look at her plants lined up on the shelf. Here she's got some hanging here, some kind of shrub plantings here.
Can I go back and ask a question about the office?
Yeah.
You ever thought about why he wasn't pictured in the house? I mean, that's one of the few pictures you've shown us of a house without people. And I mean, I understand, could it be because it's
Could
well,
be.
but it was
Yeah.
yeah,
that's true.
Yeah, but if I were getting an award for my landscape, you'd think I'd be.
Yeah. And they gave lots of awards. I mean, that wasn't the only category they gave. It would be interesting to do some more research to see.
See, the others, yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Good
Maybe
question.
if he was African American, he wouldn't understand it there or something.
That's quite possible. I mean, really, to say unfavorable conditions because of his
You
color
know,
of
they
his
served
skin.
on the police department.
But it
back
wasn't
on. I
favorable.
don't
He
think
wasn't
that's
allowed
the-
to live in the.
No, I know, but you're right. Yeah, you're right. In
Very
that
hard.
regard. Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. So there's our perfect little Ozark farmstead. Here, that's gotta be wisteria. There's some yucca. But look at that clean yard. Even though it's winter time, it still looks like it's been scraped down, this dirt. I'm not gonna go much beyond I think this might be as modern as I get with this slide program. But here, this is, you know, kind of reminded me of the houses that I grew up with, going to visit relatives as a kid. You had, that looks like maybe some kind of a little elm tree. This is a maple for sure. And this question always arises, why is there a door there? Going where? Hey, you can just get out there. Yeah. There's an iron bucket or a galvanized tub that she's probably catching water. So, here's the last picture. So, here we go. Before we stop and judge these people on looking through our filter and their sense of landscaping, and we look at this woman and say, my goodness, what a cluttered up porch. Does that lady not have any self-respect? Look at what she's got growing right there.
Yeah.
Irises. She does have an attention for beauty, and quite possibly those are irises that have been handed down for the family for generations.
And she's proud of her.
1960s, she's made a choice to stay there.
That's right, exactly, sure. And there's something staked right here that she's protecting and planting. I don't know what. And you see, this is also a matter of practicality. She's got her wood cut, her stove wood. She is still cooking on a wood stove. She's got buckets to catch water on that. But this is stuff that she's going to use. She keeps it close at hand. These old houses didn't have a lot of storage space inside. Over the courthouse. Now she is posing with that churn because I've had many people tell me you wouldn't sit and churn like that. You wouldn't sit in high heels.
No, she's
and you
proud
wouldn't
of
sit in
that.
Dextro.
She would be proud that she still owned that.
Absolutely.
Because, you know, they were hard to find in 1960.
And behind this photo, I don't know about, this woman's name was Ethel Mateer. The photo was taken by Ernie Dean, who was a well-known historian, journalist, folklorist. university professor, but he is out, he's taking her picture, and I have no doubt that they're talking about the old time ways, so she has brought this church.
Her clothes look like 1960s.
Oh, yeah, she's dressed modern, but she's wearing, and somebody said if she was really churning, she would have that churn between her legs. You
Right.
kind of held it with your knees.
She's just
really,
posing.
yeah, it's just a posed picture, absolutely.
The first time I went to Mountain View, Arkansas, right off of the downtown square, there were many houses just like this. This was like 1993. I was just flabbergasted. And, you know, a lot of people in that area lived like this until quite recently. It was their way of life.
And now, I love this photo. See that dog? Sitting in an iron tub. Don't know that I showed this photo when I learned this. I was in a nursing home doing a program with this photo, not the same program. And I've always loved that. The first time I saw this photo, I loved it because that just seemed so whimsical to me. A dog sitting in a tub. And I pointed that out to the people in the nursing home, and the lady said, well, you know why that dog's sitting in there, don't you? I said, no, why? Because she said, that's a mama dog and there's pups in there. She said, whenever our dog had pups when I was a child, before they was weaned, she said, before they was weaned, we would gather them up and put them in a tub like that to be protected from something getting them. So that, and now doesn't that make sense? Why else would a dog just be sitting there? See, that's the kind of stuff I can't learn in a history book, but it takes someone that's lived it to tell us about it.
I have to wonder if there's some sort of a electrified something in there because of that.
I think that's a light switch. Maybe. 1960, she probably has some kind of electricity. She may, but her very well may have chosen to use a wood stove. Folk artist Essie Ward, who we have a lot of her paintings in our collection, she grew up in a life just like this, and she lived out in the hills of Searcy County, Arkansas, and she achieved some fame. She went to the Festival of American Folklife in Washington, D.C., and hobnobbed with Jimmy Driftwood and was well known, sold her paintings all over the country, but lived this rural, traditional way of life. And her kids decided, her adult kids, this was in the 70s, her son said, Mama, we are going to get you a gas cook stove. So she was still cooking on a wood cook stove. So her son came in, dismantled the wood cook stove, and put it out behind the smokehouse because he was going to haul it off later. Had her new gas cook stove installed. He said the next time I went to visit Mama, she was out and back at the smokehouse where she had put that wood cook stove back together and was cooking on it outside the smokehouse. She did not want that gas stove.
Oh, my.
Susan?
All right. Yes.
There's another thing. You're showing catching rain there.
Yeah.
I've noticed that many of these houses had flaws in the roof, in the shingles. And I didn't see a single metal roof. My great-grandfather in the late 1880s built a mansard brick home, and there's a number of those up through the Midwest at least. And the metal roof lasted into the 1980s or so when my cousin had it replaced. And there were some other older homes that had the metal roof with the fold over, and those lasted over 100 years. Almost all the wood houses of that era are gone just because they let the roofs go.
Yeah.
That's now a metal roof you can purchase.
That's right. You had lots of wood, but then again, how many of them knew the old, or followed the superstition, you're only supposed to ride shingles or cut shingles by a certain phase of the moon. If you do, and I can't quote you exactly which phase, but if you do it at the wrong time, your shingles will curl and cause leaking. Oh.
Yeah.
Your shingles will curl anyway. All right, any questions or comments?
Thank you so much.
Thank you.